This video will contain spoilers for Maul Shadow Lord Season 1. The Maul Shadow Lord finale episodes just dropped last Monday, ironically only a half hour after I had just posted a video on the previous episodes. I thought the finale was great, it tied the show up well, but I think I noticed something that no one else has. We never once see the death of a TK Trooper Sergeant. Now you might say to yourself, why does this matter? They're just random soldiers, random NCOs. But the show doesn't like to focus on the deaths of major characters, such as Lieutenant Blake. This show has a weird relationship with death, and I'm assuming most won't have realized that until this video finishes. I want to start this video talking about TK Troopers, but then we will move on to main characters, because that's the most interesting part. Going back to TK Troopers, you might say to yourself that we've definitely seen the death of a sergeant at some point. We see TK Troopers getting wiped out in giant numbers, led by sergeants multiple times. However, we actually don't see a single TK Trooper sergeant die at any point, and in fact, they're even removed from shots so they don't have to die. Now, in case people aren't aware, when I say TK Trooper Sergeant, I'm referring to a TK Trooper with a white pauldron. Episode 5 is the first episode in Maul Shadow Lord where there is combat between our heroes and TK Troopers. However, there are no TK Trooper Sergeants in Episode 5. But Episode 6 does have one officer during the casino raid. Other troopers do seem to take leadership roles in many of the scenes I would have assumed would require the presence of a sergeant, but likely these represent other NCOs. But looking at the casino raid in Episode 6, this is again the first time we see a TK Trooper Sergeant in a combat scenario. We see the sergeant speaking briefly and tell his men to fan out, but then we literally never see him again. Realistically, this sergeant should either be trying to contain Rena Sol, storming the main office, which is their primary objective, or going down into the basement levels. But he's just never once shown again at all. So where'd this random sergeant go? Okay, so maybe Episode 7 will be different, and I'll give you a spoiler. It's not. I thought it would be, and I actually recorded this video thinking it was, but it's not. Now, Episode 7 has 2 battles in it, and 2 TK Trooper Sergeants are shown in the first battle, even though technically the second battle should be the more important one and have a TK Trooper Sergeant, but I digress. There was one moment in the second battle that made me think, okay, maybe I just saw a TK Trooper Sergeant death. But if you actually look at the frames one by one, nope, just a random trooper. So let's talk about the 2 sergeants in the first battle. So we see this officer kind of in the corner, and we see him advancing, and then the camera cuts away. And then when it cuts back, we see a random nondescript trooper getting a bolt deflected into their chest and falling to the ground. Now, based on the positioning, it looks like it's a trooper, but I checked out the model, and it doesn't look the same at all. This is clearly not a sergeant. So again, they disappear. Well, what about the other sergeant in this battle? Well, they're a little less interesting. They basically just end up grabbing Riley, kidnapping him, throwing him on a gunship, and bringing him away. So it makes sense that this trooper didn't die. He was holding a prisoner. This show does not skimp out on death scenes for TK troopers. They get visually sliced up by lightsabers, visually have blaster bolts deflected into them. They die a lot, and in bulk. So why are TK Trooper Sergeants exempt from this treatment? We'll discuss why I think this is, but let's just continue on with the last 3 episodes. Episode 8 never shows any sergeants, but it does show the deaths of both Lieutenant Blake and Rena Sol. We never get a confirmation for either, and we never focus on it, but it seems unlikely that they survived that. Now, both are major characters, Blake being one of the main antagonists in the show up to this point. And wait, they only ever cover Callice's death for a quick moment, so they clearly don't want the audience focusing on the deaths of that character either, of any of these three characters. But we can focus on the deaths of other characters like Kebris and Maul's brothers. Again, something is going on here, but I don't think we can unpack it quite yet, so let's continue on the search for sergeants in the meantime. But hold all of this in your head. We move to episode 9, where the scenes that inspired this video occurred. So here we see a sergeant ordering his troopers to open fire on Maul. And every single trooper here, except for the ones done by Riley of course, ends up dying. But you know who we never see again after that initial order? That's right, the sergeant. And his body is also never shown. So did he just leave? And then Marok and the 11th brother arrive, and we see another sergeant. Maybe the same one? He definitely sounds like the same officer, but then again, they all kind of sound the same. So a while later, we see the Inquisitors and a ton of troopers ambush Maul and the rest of the party, and this is my favorite fight scene in the entire show, and we do see a sergeant here, and you'll never guess what happens to them. Okay, so first they appear, okay, then they direct some troops, and then, oh wait, we literally never see them again. Not for the entire fight. Now, we could just chalk this up to, oh, the TK Trooper Sergeant probably died off screen. And realistically, yeah, that's what happened. But whoever was animating the show had to make the decision to remove the model of the TK Trooper Sergeant at some point from the scene's composition. It's clearly intentional, at least somewhat, for these TK Trooper Sergeants to not die in battle. But let's move on to episode 10. This is the final episode. This is the final time where maybe we will see a TK Trooper Sergeant die. And we do see a sergeant, and once again they give some orders, but then they disappear for a little while and we don't see them. But then they reappear later, where Captain Lawson ends up firing towards the TK troopers, including the sergeant. Now, the fog in this last episode is incredibly heavy, and so as these troopers reposition, they enter into this fog, making it impossible to tell if the sergeant died or not. And some troopers did, but we don't know if the sergeant died. And this is pretty convenient for them, to not have to kill a sergeant again. Why is this? Well, the officers who don't die are the ones who have speaking roles. It's likely that Disney A wants to reuse the officers' voice actors, which they did as far as I can tell, and B, they want to limit the deaths of characters with speaking roles, in order to keep it kid-friendly, where they can. That explains why we don't focus much on Callice's death, other than the arbitrary line, or Blake's death, again, both major characters. So why can we focus on certain deaths like Kebris's, Maul's two Zabrak brothers, Spybot, Rookast, and Master Daki? Well, Kebris is shown as an antagonist, and his betrayal moves the plot along as to why they can't use their ship, so it's justified. And the deaths of the other four, well, these are all deaths that further the story. They make us sad, make us scared, and it furthers the arcs of various characters like Maul, and just our main characters in general. We also don't focus a lot on the deaths of Lawson or the supposed deaths of Marok. Though again, these are mostly fake-out deaths, and to be fair, we focus a little bit on Lawson's, a little bit on what Riley thinks, but again, these are likely both things that are going to get retcons. Marok, almost guarantee he isn't dead, and then Lawson, it just seems like they're setting up a fake-out death, because they didn't show us him dying, I guess. Though, of course, it could just be Disney trying to make it more family-friendly. Despite Maul Shadow Lord being one of the more mature Star Wars animated shows, it is still made for kids, and Disney doesn't want tons of big characters dying, or to focus too much on death in general, so they'll gloss over it. Anytime you make a character speak at all, you give the character personality. So, we get to the sergeants we started the video with. Again, a lot of them speak, and the fact that they have a pauldron at all, or that they are a sergeant, gives them at least some shred of personality. So, they only focus on the deaths that further the story, or the faceless troopers without any meaningful voice lines. Same for those just random police officers wearing helmets, or the random droids or pikes, because aliens obviously don't have personalities because they're not humans, right? Human supremacy forever. Moving on. It did feel weird when the show never focused on the deaths of Calais and Blake, but realizing that they only once ever kill a TK Trooper Sergeant, now that's interesting. All of a sudden I think of Bad Batch and how Clone Force 99 switched over to stun rounds. Yes, because it was technically more effective since stun rounds are easier to hit people with, and yeah, they were also fighting their own brothers, but in the previous seasons, they never had this issue. I guarantee you the biggest issue in real life was that the showrunners didn't want the heroes to kill people unnecessarily, so they switched over to stun rounds and invented reasons for that decision to make sense. Whatever the case, I hope this video has gotten you to think more about how Star Wars animation and Star Wars in general treats death. And I hope next time you watch something in the Star Wars animated universe, you look at the way they treat death, because this certainly isn't the first time a show has decided to do something like this. But anyways, thank you for watching, have a nice day, and maybe subscribe, as I would love to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of June. And we are awfully close.